Stick with the job that we hired you for. Don't start pretending you're a doctor or a health professional, because I can tell you, you aren't.
A war of words between Ontario's Auditor General and Premier Doug Ford has taken a very interesting turn this week. You may recall Auditor Bonnie Lysyk released a damning report about Ontario's COVID response. You saw her just there. She said it wasn't being led by public health officials, and that prompted an angry response from the Premier. Now, there are questions about accuracy, hubris, and who is auditing the auditor. Martin Redcon is a columnist with the Toronto Star and joins us on Focus. Martin, you had a number of columns about Bonnie Lysyk, and the number of people that came forward to talk about the auditor was very surprising. What did you find?
Well, I guess the question is who watches the watchdog? And as important as the Auditor General's work is, and in fact, that's what people who contacted me are all saying, is that everyone recognizes, especially a journalist, how important it is to hold a government to account. But you have to do it in a credible and consistent and coherent way. And with this last report on the pandemic, and also a whole bunch of reports that she has done over the course of an almost 10-year term, because an auditor is appointed for 10 years, the concern is that there's a hunt for headlines, something that journalists do as well, a hunt for headlines and going for the jugular and sometimes screwing up on the facts. And the most famous examples being, for example, saying that Metrolinx had installed a bridge truss upside down. Well, you can't do that. That defies the laws of gravity. You'd have an entire bridge upside down. Other examples of bullying or being quite inappropriate with public servants. So a number of people, Francis Lankin, a former NDP cabinet minister, Janet Ecker, a former PC cabinet minister, David Peterson, a former premier on the Liberal side, all contacted me after a couple of columns and just enumerated their concerns about how the Auditor General is overstepping and overreaching. And there are many others I've received about that. And it brings me no pleasure to say that, but I have to say, having heard and looked at some of the concerns, there is something awry with the Auditor General.
It's odd. After your columns, actually, former Liberal staffers contacted me even to share stories about the auditor. It was odd the way that this column has prompted that. But there is a sort of a delicious irony here, is there not? Seeing that the PCs were always saying to the Liberals, you must respect the auditor, and now the tables have turned.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, because, I welcome skepticism in the public. Skepticism is part of our approach as journalists. And so there's this question, well, oh my goodness, is this the Tories trying to sandbag the Liberal, the Auditor General, and are you part of some ploy and conspiracy to undermine her and protect Doug Ford? That's not really in the Toronto Star's DNA. But what's ironic is that when they were in opposition, Doug Ford's Tories went and treated the Auditor General as gospel. And that's part of Canadian political culture, to treat the Auditor General as some kind of a truth teller, and people suspend their critical judgment. They treat her like a Supreme Court justice. Well, as we know in the US, not every Supreme Court justice is necessarily objective or comes to the facts with an open mind. And so on questions, sometimes they're obscure and down in the weeds, like what is the true value of pension assets, or what is the correct approach on carbon pricing? The Auditor General doesn't just look at numbers to make sure there's no corruption. The Auditor General does what's called a value for money audit. And the concern is that she is kind of imposing her own values, her own skepticism of carbon pricing, for example, into these audits, and trying to do things that really are in the realm of politics rather than auditing and accounting. That's the conundrum.
I want to move to Charles McVety in Canada Christian College. It appears that Bill 213 will be called on Monday and passed by the majority PCs in the legislature. This would potentially extend degree granting powers to Canada Christian College. It appears the Ford government has not been swayed by criticism or deputations. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a good question about motives. I can't prove this, but my fear and my concern is that Doug Ford has a big fat political IOU to Charles McVety, who was out there right out of the gate in supporting Doug Ford when he ran for the Progressive Conservative leadership, and brought with him the support of social conservatives, people who are students at his Bible college, supporters, donors, broadly speaking, and rallied behind Doug Ford. And now it's a quid pro quo. And Doug Ford is doing something that he probably knows is wrong. Just like he and the Tories knew the problems with the Auditor General before and pretended that the Auditor General had it absolutely bang on. Now the progressive conservatives are ignoring what they know to be true, which is that this college really faces a great deal of skepticism. Outside regulatory authorities have questioned the value of their current degrees without even having university status. Why on earth would you upgrade a questionable college with a track record of for financial improprieties or certainly questionable financial practices? Why would you grant them university status to give out BAs and BScs when the president doesn't even believe in evolution? That doesn't make sense.
Martin Wright-Kahn, Ontario politics columnist for the Toronto Star. We'll have to leave it there. Always great to have you on Focus, Martin. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alan. Take care.